But really, the words that we say are an overflow of our heart. And so, what if we allowed rest to become a regular part of our life? How much better would our relationships be? How much better would our relationship with God be? And so, as I was, scrolling through Facebook this morning and last night, I saw a post from several members of the staff of Noblesville West Middle School and parents on Facebook, and they said this in some form or fashion at the end of their post: hug your kids. Keep your loved ones close. Don't take anything for granted. And so we're going to talk about this idea of rest so that we can not take anything for granted, so that we can be all that God has created us to be, to live the life that God has created us to live. And this is a challenge for me. I'm a goal-oriented person. I'm a driven person. I was laying on the couch the other night. It was like 6:30 at night. It's maybe 7:30 at night. I don't really know what time it was. And in my mind, I was resting, like I was like chilling out on the couch, getting ready for a playoff game. Not my own, but on TV. And I just said to Tricia, "Hey, did you get that email I forwarded to you?" And it just came out of my mouth, right? And Micah's like, "Does your mind ever shut off?" And I'm like, "Wait, I'm resting. I'm chilling out. I'm not working, but I was working." So what I'm going to talk to you about, a friend of mine last night, I was at a birthday party with some folks from Hope City, and a friend of mine who knows the pace that I go at, she said, "I can hardly wait to hear your message on rest tomorrow." She's like, "There are certain messages that you speak from a place that you've applied it. There's other messages that you speak of, I'm working on this. And this is one that I'm working on, okay? Because when it comes to my schedule, when it comes to my focus, when it comes to the pace of my life, I struggle with rest. I struggle with turning things off. And what happens is I focus on accomplishment and I forget about becoming. Like when you aren't able to rest, what becomes the driving force of your life is the very next thing, not becoming all that God has created you to be. And I will sacrifice relationships for accomplishment. I will run myself and those I love into the ground with trying to get things done. And I put this on your notes if you're following along on the app, and it's also going to be on the screen, but busyness is less about our calendar and it's more about our heart. If you struggle with constant and chronic busyness, it's less about your calendar and it's more about your heart. And I'll say that it's less about our calendar and more about our heart, okay? Because I'm preaching to myself. I read an article this week in the Huffington Post entitled, "Being Busy as a Status Symbol." And the focus of the article was basically like, much like our cars, our houses, our corner offices, the clothes that we wear, the jewelry that we buy, the outward things that we have, that we display to those around us as status symbols, as hey, look at how important I am, look at how accomplished I am, look at the subdivision that we're moving into, look at the tax bracket that I'm in, look at the nice car that I buy, look at the money that I make, that we put busyness in that category and we say, hey, look how busy I am. Look how frantic my life is. And so if we're going to really come to terms with this four-letter word of rest, we don't really need to start with our calendar. It's not going to be a application of, hey, pull out your iPhone or pull out your Android, pull up your calendar and just delete everything from next week. Right? Because it's not like that. We have to start with our heart. I mentioned this last week, but I think it's worth repeating this week, that we say yes to things that make us busy because we believe that they make us valuable. There's a rush. There's an adrenaline rush when we're busy. We all want to be needed. We all want to be needed on that committee at our kids' school. We want to be needed so we can get that promotion at work. We want to feel needed as our kid has an opportunity to play travel sports. Somehow it's a reflection on our ability or our success as a parent. Like, oh my gosh, he or she can't miss that opportunity, right? And we want to be needed in that meeting and included. We want every contribution that we have to make to be factored in on every decision at our job. And so we clutter our schedule with meetings and obligations and games and travel and overtime. And it doesn't help us become the person that God has created us to be. It helps us feel more needed by people who don't value us beyond our ability to produce. That's what busyness really does. Busyness allows you to feel valued by people who only care about you to the extent that you add value to them. And what happens is we forego our most important relationships, our relationship with God first, and then our relationship with those that we love the most. And there's a difference between attending your kid's game and being with your kids, right? There's a difference between being at home with your family and actually being with your family. Like, we all have an ability to be with people, but not really be with people. We have an ability to not do stuff, but still not rest. Jesus cares more about who we're becoming than what we're accomplishing. And I don't know if we really believe that. Because I think that some of us carry this idea of accomplishment. Some of us carry this idea of work and success into our relationship with God. And we think, okay, if I'm not doing things for God, if I'm not doing this and this and this and this, I'm not really a good Christian. I'm not really a good Christ follower. God's going to be disappointed in me. And God really cares more about our heart than he does anything else. When I was 2005, I guess, 2005, I got out of ministry for 4 years. And so from 2005 to 2009, I worked as a headhunter for commercial bankers. And a headhunter basically finds jobs for people, and for my clients were banks. And so they would pay me a commission for finding a position, filling a position with a commercial banker. And it was high risk, high reward. It was commission only sales. I got like a $2,000 a month draw. And if you didn't close a deal, then you didn't have groceries. I mean, it was just this high risk, high reward sales job. And I'd never done anything like that before. I'd always been in ministry. And so it was brand new to me. And I got a rush out of it because it was accomplishment oriented. They would have us put on like a bulletin board how many interviews we had so that we would compete with each other. Right? And so even though there was other people in the office that they were not doing commercial banking, we would always be competing with how many interviews we could get, how many jobs that we could fill, how much money we were producing. So there was this running tally at all times. It fit right into how I'm wired for accomplishment. Well, I started doing pretty well. I won a couple of President's Club trips, and then we had to sit in these cubicles called the bullpen when we first started. And after you build a certain amount of money, you got to move into an office. And so after a few months, I had built enough. I moved into an office. It had no windows. It was like this little closet. And it was like just depressing to be in there all by myself all day. I made about 100 calls a day on the phone. And so I'm like, I need to get out of here. And you had to get a window office, you had to bill $500,000. And so a few months later, I had hit that mark and moved into this corner office overlooking Conseco at the time, Bankers Life Arena, seven floors up, right downtown. I could see right into home court. It was unbelievable. And I kept winning these awards, kept winning these trips. And 4 years into this whole thing, I felt like God was calling us back into ministry. And I'd gone through a 1-year restoration process to go into ministry. I met with my boss, who's this amazing Catholic guy that just loved God, loved the people that worked for him. He was super compassionate. He had won like 3 state championships for Roncalli High School as a football coach, and got out of teaching and coaching football and became this headhunter and managed our office and was the owner at this point. And so I sat down with him. I kind of poured my heart out of, hey, I was so broken when I came here and you gave me a chance, and I feel like God is really calling me back into ministry, and so I want to give you my 30-day notice. Now, at this point, in my relationship with this company I'd brought in a little over $1 million in revenue in 4 years, about $250,000 a year over the last 4 years. And so I was one of the top producers. Within 10 minutes of that conversation, of giving him my 30-day notice, I was met by a security guard at my desk in my corner office overlooking Conseco to be escorted and packed up out of the building. Like, they were done with me. As soon as I said I was done with them, they were done with me. And you know what? I haven't talked to anyone there since. Like, I'm friends with them on Facebook, but we don't hang out together. They only valued me to the level that I was producing for the company. And when I was done producing, they were done with me. And I think that we think God is like that. But that is not the way of Jesus. Jesus doesn't care about our accomplishments as much as he cares about our heart. He cares way more about who you're becoming than what you're accomplishing. In this passage we're going to look at today in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42, there's this story that if you've been in church any length of time, you've heard it. It's about a story about two of Jesus's best friends, Mary and Martha. And it's a story about how one is focused on accomplishment and the other is focused on the things that are most important. So we're going to read it together. Luke chapter 10, verse 38 through 42, it says this. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught, but Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. Now, I want to talk about this idea of biblical rest. Now, rest in the Bible is called Sabbath, and there was a day set aside for Sabbath. There was a day set aside for rest in the Jewish culture, but Jesus models, even in the New Testament, what it means to prioritize what is important, what it means to rest, what it means to look at life and not be so busy and so consumed with accomplishment, but really take in and prioritize what is most important. And so I want to give you just 4 principles this morning on how we can find rest. And the first is we need to be available to Jesus. Look at verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Here's what I know about walking with God for the last 35 years almost. That's a long time. I'm really old. Wow. It's possible to be in a relationship with Jesus and not spend time with Jesus. If you're married, you know this to be true, right? Marriage is the most intimate relationship that you can have as a human being, right, on this earth. Marriage is the most intimate human relationship that we can experience. But you can be married to someone and still not know them. You can be married to someone and still have great distance in your relationship. You can be married to somebody and live at the same address, but not really share life. You can just cohabitate, right? You can just live in the same place, but not really share life with one another. And I think the same principle applies in our relationship with God. It's possible to be in a relationship with Jesus and really not spend a whole lot of time with Jesus. It's possible to be in a relationship with Jesus and just check him off of our list as something that we need to do or something that we need to accomplish. And so my question is, Martha invited Jesus in. She said, okay, hey, you're traveling through, we're really busy, but I'm going to invite you in. I'm going to make time for you. She doesn't get everything right, but the initial step of just inviting Jesus, opening her home up to Jesus. And my question to you this morning is, do you have time in your schedule for him? Is Jesus just something that you check off your list on a Sunday? Or is there a spiritual awareness throughout your week that, hey, I need to be in a relationship with Jesus, and in order to do that, I have to make time for him? And it sounds really simple, doesn't it? It is simple. We need to spend time with God. It's super simple, but it's not easy. And if you say it's easy, then maybe you're not living the life that I'm living, right? Because when you get stressed, when you get busy, when your schedule gets overflowed, when your family is going 5 different directions, what is the first thing to go in your life? Time with God, I'm assuming. And then time with people that you love the most, right? When there's a deadline at work, I'm guessing that the most tempting thing to cut out of your day is spiritual disciplines, is spiritual time with God. So it's simple to say, oh, we need to spend time with Jesus, but it's not easy. Martha opens her home up. And I want to encourage you, if you're a stay-at-home mom, have you ever thought about just asking God to move into the minutes that you're spending at home with your kids? If you're a student, have you ever thought about just asking God into your schedule at school, just talking to God through the hallways at school, inviting God into, your math class, into, your lunchtime? I mean, all of us pray in school right before a test, right? That doesn't count, okay? Especially tests we don't study for, all right? God, give me supernatural ability to know the answer to this, test that I have not studied for. That doesn't count. I'm talking about this awareness of God's presence all throughout your day. If you have a corporate job, if you work in an office, just walking through your office, spending time at your desk, just saying, hey, God, I want to make some time for you in this moment, between phone calls, between meetings. It's not rocket science. It's not this super complicated thing. It's just inviting more of Jesus into more of our heart. That's the first way that we find rest, because rest is not about your calendar, it's about your heart. And if you're going to experience rest, Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary, all you who are heavy burdened, all of you who are tired, and I will give you rest. And so often we look to an afternoon nap, we look to escaping on the internet or escaping on Facebook or escaping as we watch TV. We equate escapism with rest, and Jesus said, hey, I'm the author of rest. And if you want to experience more rest in your life, it starts with me. Secondly, we need to identify what distracts us. If you're going to find rest, you need to identify what distracts you. Look at verse 40 of Luke 10. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. So Martha invites Jesus in. Good job. And then she just doesn't spend any time with him. She's like, hey, sit right here. I got to go, right? And she goes in the kitchen. She starts making this. She wants to wow Jesus with this meal that she's making. She wants to impress him. I think I've told this story at Hope City before, but it's such a good illustration of being distracted that I thought I would just call myself out and share it with you again. But in 2006, our family went on a family vacation to Destin, Florida. And we've gone to Florida most years, since 2002, really. And this is a special place for us. And so we go to Destin, we stay in this condo, and there's a rain day. Obviously, it rains usually once or twice while we're there every year. And so there's a rain day, so we go to the outlet malls in Destin. If we can't spend the money on the beach, we're going to go spend the money at the outlet mall. So we're driving around Destin, we're going past all these things, and I say to my wife over and over and over again, like 3 or 4 different times, I'm like, this place looks really familiar. Like, I feel like I've been here before. I think I've been here before. And like after the third time we were driving past this restaurant, I said, I think that I've eaten at that restaurant before. This sounds crazy, but I'm having a deja vu moment like over and over and over again. And she's like, Justin, are you being serious right now? And I'm like, yeah, why would I not be serious? She's like, we came here on vacation 3 years ago. I'm like, no way. You're kidding me. We came to Destin, Florida on vacation 3 years ago? She's like, yes, we stayed in the condos right behind that Waffle House. I'm like, no way. That's unbelievable. I mean, no wonder it all seems familiar. I stayed here for 5 days. Well, that in 2003, Palm Sunday was the beginning of spring break. And we were preparing at the church that we had just started 9 months before, we were preparing for our first Easter service. And I was going to be at the beach from Palm Sunday to Good Friday, and I was going to drive back for our first Easter service. And so I had all of these people calling me and all these meetings that I was attending while my family was at the beach. I was in Destin, but I was never really in Destin, to the point where 3 years later, I couldn't even remember being there. That's how distracted I was that entire week. And my wife literally thought, she's like, you have some serious mental issues, right? Like, there is something really wrong with you that you don't remember. I was so stressed out, so distracted. I was on my phone. This is before really email was coming to phones, but I had a BlackBerry. I felt like, Secret Service. I had this important BlackBerry, and I was getting all these emails. I was approving all these designs. I was quarterbacking the entire Easter service from Destin, thinking that I was scoring points with my wife by being there, but I was never really there. And most importantly, I'll never get that time back with my family. I didn't rest at all. I didn't go back refreshed. I went back as stressed out and as overrun as I was before I ever got there. Martha was distracted. She wasn't distracted by sin. She wasn't distracted by something bad. She was going to make a phenomenal meal for Jesus, right? This was something good. She was going to be impressive. She was going to wow him. She was going all Bobby Flay for Jesus. She was distracted by something really good, and she missed what was best. Easter didn't stop happening. It's happened every year since 2003. But I'll never get that week back with my kids. It's easy to be distracted by doing good things, and we forget about the ultimate thing. And so maybe your kids don't need you to earn a promotion by working 80 hours a week. Maybe your husband needs you to desire him as much as you desire a clean house. Maybe your wife doesn't need you to be so busy working around the house every waking moment that you're home. She just needs you to be present with her. Maybe your friends aren't as impressed with the job that you have or the car that you drive or the clothes that you wear or the subdivision that you live in. Maybe they just need you to be the person that you claim to be. See, maybe God doesn't desire this great Christian performance and you going through this great, amazing Christian checklist. He just wants you to be with him. He desires your heart. So don't miss what is ultimate because you're distracted by what is good. Third, we need to stop comparing our life to others. If we're going to find rest, we need to stop comparing our life to others. Luke chapter 10, verse 40 says, she came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. You know what will wear you out? There's a difference between physical exhaustion and emotional and mental exhaustion, right? And so when we're busy a lot, there's a physical toll that it takes on us. There's a physical aspect that we get worn out physically. But what I think is more exhausting is when we can't rest mentally, when we can't rest emotionally, because that is a cyclical thing that it doesn't matter if we're sleeping, it doesn't matter if we're awake, it's always running through our mind. And comparison will not only kill your joy, it will wear you out and it will rob you of rest. Finding rest isn't just about our schedules. It's not just about our pace of life. It's about our emotional and mental health. When Trish and I lived in Nashville, this was probably about a little over 5 years ago. Actually, it was about 5 years ago this summer. We were writing our book, and we reached out to this guy. We didn't really know him very well, but we had a lot of common friends. We had a lot of friends in common, and he's a pretty prominent author, and we wanted his endorsement for our book. And so we reached out to him through a mutual friend and said, hey, if we send you a copy of our galley copy of our book, would you read it and offer an endorsement for it? And he texted me back and said, hey, thanks so much for thinking of me. I'm in a really busy season right now. I'm writing my next book. I don't have time to read your book, and I won't offer an endorsement of a book unless I have read it, which you think is actually normal, but it's not normal. Most people don't read the book before they endorse it. And so I applauded his integrity, was really bummed that he turned us down. And so when the book came out a few months later, we sent him a copy with just a nice note just saying, hey, I know that you weren't able to endorse this book, but we'd be honored if you'd at least read it and let us know what you think. Well, about a couple months after the book came out, I get a text message from this author asking if he could meet my wife and I for lunch the week that he was going to be in Nashville in just a few days. So we rearranged our schedule. We meet this guy for lunch, and we sit down, and the first thing he says, literally as our rear ends hit the booth, he says, who wrote that book? Who's your ghostwriter? I have to meet them. That book is amazing. I read it cover to cover, and I need to know who wrote that book. And I literally thought my wife's head was going to pop off, all right? She was like, are you crazy? She's like, we wrote every word of that book. There's no ghostwriter. He's like, wow, that just blows my mind. I'm like, are we imbeciles? Like, why would you not think that we wrote that book, right? So the lunch is not off to a good start. And so you know how you just like, you don't want to meet people that you admire sometimes because your opinion of them might differ. And so this was going through my mind. And so as we're sitting there, within 5 minutes of being there, he tells me that his book has sold over 500,000 copies, the marriage book that I love so much. And that, he just, has sold all these copies, and that our book's probably not going to sell that many copies. And he starts rattling off stats of all of these marriage books and how many books they have sold and all the book deals that these other authors have gotten. And it was just like, I just thought we were like coming together as a couple, like bros, just to like hug it out, right? Like it was just, and so I started getting consumed with all these stats. I started getting consumed with the Amazon number, our ranking on Amazon, and all this stuff that he had told us, and all how the Christian literary, being a Christian author is all, rigged and all this stuff, and how he was so jaded. And so I was like constantly, I get up at like 2 a.m, go check my Amazon numbers. Right? Like how many books are we selling? Are we going to be able to compete in this, this genre of books that nobody buys, right? And all this stuff. And I was just worn out comparing our life and our book with this guy's book, which I had never even done before until I had lunch with this bozo, right? And so I love him in Jesus' name. And so about 2 weeks into this, I'm just so tired. I'm so stressed out. And Trisha goes, Justin, she's like, our competition is not other marriage books. Our competition is every marriage that's struggling. Our competition is every marriage that is just coasting. Our competition is divorce. That's who our competition is. And it was just this perspective-changing conversation that I needed to have, that I was so consumed with comparison that I was losing focus on what was most important. And if you want to lose joy and if you want to rob yourself of rest, compare your life to somebody else's life. You're not as smart as your sister. You're not as successful as your brother. You're never going to be as, the favorite of your parents like your sibling. Like there's so many roads that you could go down and so many comparisons that you can make in your life, and it will just rob you of everything that God has created you to be. When we compare ourselves to others, we aren't capable of allowing our hearts to rest. People we don't even know become our competition, and we become our worst enemy. Finally, we need to prioritize what's significant and not just urgent. If we're going to find rest, if we're going to really experience Sabbath in our life, we need to prioritize what's significant and not just urgent. Look at verse 41 through 42. It says, but the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and I'm not going to take it away from her. See, each of us have the same amount of time in a given day. We have the same amount of days in a week, and what happens so easily in my life, and maybe so easily in your life, is that we begin to put out fires in our life. We begin to pursue what is urgent, and we forget to prioritize what is significant. We can get so worried and upset about all the details that we miss out on those things that carry the most significance. Our oldest son gets married 28 days from today. It's a sobering thing. Our 19-year-old son moves a week from tomorrow to Gary, Indiana to do an internship at a church and a school there for the summer. We were sitting at our 15-year-old, our Isaiah is actually in New Orleans this weekend at a basketball tournament that we were too busy to be able to even go with him to be a part of. And he goes into high school next year. There's all these transitions, and we were sitting at Jalen's fourth grade graduation, which I didn't even know they had those, but we were at his fourth grade graduation, and it was the same gymnasium that Elijah graduated from 10 years ago. And they're playing this really just heart-wrenching, kick-you-in-the-teeth music about the time going so fast and slowing down and showing all these pictures on this video of all these kids. And I'm literally bawling my eyes out. Everyone in Zionsville thinks I'm a psychopath because I'm literally just crying. Like, I can't control it. My lip is quivering. I'm on the verge of like sucking my thumb in a corner. That's how upset I was. And I'm like, why can I not get it together? And it was just this reality that we only have so much time with the people that we love the most. And you can pursue the things that are going to move you ahead at work, and you can pursue the things that are going to move you ahead in your community or in social circles. You can pursue all of the things that you feel like will keep you busy. But sometimes when we do that, we rob ourselves of the things that are most significant. And we can't get that back. And so I want to encourage you as you go into the summer, as we start the summer this week, what are the things that are significant? What are the things 5 years from now that you're going to look back on and go, man, I'm so glad I didn't miss that. I'm so glad that I prioritized that. I'm so glad that we took that vacation. You're not going to remember some of the meetings that you missed. You're not going to remember a lot of the things that you said no to, but you will remember the things that you said yes to. And may we be a people that values what is significant over what's urgent and allow God to bring rest to our souls so that we can be the husbands and wives and sisters and brothers and moms and dads that we desire to be. It doesn't happen by accident. We have to choose it. We have to fight for it. Okay, let's pray together.